Welcome to From Our Generation, where we uncover the ideas and events that shape the world we live in today. I'm Crom Carmichael.
And I'm Mike Hassel.
Together we'll explore the past to better understand the present, because history isn't just about what happened, it's about how you think about it. Well, Michael, it's been a while since you and I were last here. It's now April 20th. And I think the last time we were here would have been, certainly you. Rush and I did one in your absence.
That's right.
We had a great deal of fun.
That's right. I've got a grandbaby on the way, and so Susan and I went to visit our daughter and take her a bunch of shower gifts that she had gotten and couldn't get there otherwise.
Well,
so
congratulations.
We're preparing the nest.
Okay. Oh, so it hadn't happened yet.
No, it's due in mid-May.
I got you. Okay. Well, and so there's so many topics, and we're not going to be able to cover all of them, so we'll cover the ones that you and I, before the show, decided we thought were most important or at least relevant to us.
Let's do it.
Yeah. The first one is kind of a combination of the excursion, war, whatever you want to call it, in Iran, the Pope's original statement, Trump's reaction, how the Democrats have reacted, and how the media has reacted.
Yes.
And so it's a number of different topics.
A multifaceted
phenomenon. Yes.
You know, I used to work at the Gibson Guitar Company, and they had an R&D area. And there was a guy there that had to build this thing he didn't like. It was to be cheap, I think. And he would not call it a guitar. He called it an apparatus. So we can search for words to describe what's going on in Iran. You know, maybe there's an equivalent to apparatus.
Well, what's going on in Iran is easier to describe than the back and forth between the Pope and Trump, and then the reaction to that by the media, by the Democrats, and now by the Catholic Church, which is not the Pope. I mean, in other words, it's
part of the
church that's not the Pope.
Yes.
So I find so we're going to start on this. So let's kind of set the table that the Pope made his comments about 2 weeks ago. His original comments, and I have them here. So let me just read them, just so I can kind of set the table, because I have it here. And here's what Pope Leo XIV said: God does not bless any conflict. Anyone who is a disciple of Christ, the Prince of Peace, is never on the side of those who once wielded the sword and today drop bombs. Military action will not create space for freedom or times of peace, which comes only from a patient promotion of coexistence and dialogue among peoples. He then expanded on that. Absurd and inhumane violence is spreading ferociously through the sacred places of the Christian East, profaned by the blasphemy of war and the brutality of business, with no regard for people's lives, which are considered at most collateral damage of self-interest. But no gain can be worth the life of the weakest children or families. No cause can justify the shedding of innocent blood. Okay, now, so and that, by the way, the first one came a day after the Pope had met with Obama's political strategist.
Is this Axelrod?
David Axelrod came a day after.
Mm-hmm.
The first one did.
So on that point, let me just jump in on that point. Since I've seen you, I was with some friends who happen to be Catholic, and the wife is devoutly Catholic. And those two data points alone convinced them that this was a political effort to divide the Catholic vote.
Okay. And so what we have is, if part of the Pope's motivation was political in nature, what does that say about this current Pope?
Well,
about his moral standing. Because he also said, I am not weighing in for political purposes. He said that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not aware of any Pope who has done that kind of thing. We had, was it Pope John, the one that was anti-communist?
Pope John Paul II.
John Paul, yes.
II.
That's very political, and it realigned Europe, right? But to enter into
But he never said, I'm not trying to realign Europe.
That's right. Fair enough. Yeah. I'm just saying that the nature of this political intervention is different, I think.
Yes.
And, I expect, what do you call them, peaceniks, somebody from the church to say conflict and war is never the answer.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're wrong. There is a long tradition in the Catholic Church of just war theory.
Well, we're going to get to that.
Yeah.
We're going to get to that in just a second as to whether or not the Catholic Church itself has promulgated doctrine that contradicts this Pope's own words.
Well, this is what I was saying. There's a long tradition of just war.
Just war. And he says there's no just war.
Right.
That is what he is saying here.
Right. But to me, it's equivalent to saying if you walk down the street and you see some thugs beating up on an old lady or on the children, you should just walk on by because there's no justification for violence. I say that's wrong.
I think that's a pretty good metaphor or example especially for this particular one, because I actually have with me an article that was written. I'm not going to be able to pronounce this lady's name properly, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try one time, and then I'm going to talk about this lady. So she's Iranian. She now lives in the U.S. Mazara Amirzadeh.
I'm glad you only have to do that once.
Yeah.
Let's just call her.
Yeah. See if you can pronounce her name better.
I would guess just like you.
Well, I tried to phonetically put it here, so we're doing this on the fly here. This is
Amirzadeh. Yes, that's the best I can do.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So at any rate, but this is an Iranian lady. So let me set this up with her story. She was a Muslim woman in Iran who converted to Christianity.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to quote, rather than me, I'm going to just read some of this from her story. It says, it's no secret, it says, I'm quoting her, it's no secret that since 1979, the Islamic Republic has used arrest, torture, and execution as a means of repressing the Iranian people. Hundreds of thousands have been slaughtered over the decades, some following fake staged trials, like mine, where the verdict was predetermined. Others have been executed in cold blood on the streets, many of whose remains disappeared by being buried and literally paved over, thrown into lakes with their hands bound, and other sick, inhuman acts that define the Islamic Republic. With hundreds of thousands of Iranians executed, what made my case different? Why the international outcry from people as influential as the Pope, not this Pope, a previous Pope? And why does that matter today? I was arrested in March of 2009 and convicted of apostasy, carrying an automatic death sentence. My crime? I converted to Christianity a decade earlier.
Apostasy is equivalent to heresy, right?
Well, apostasy in the Muslim is you stop being a Muslim and you convert to Christianity.
Okay.
That is you're an apostate.
Right.
And that is a death penalty.
Right.
Under strict Muslim law, under Sharia law, that is a death penalty if it's going to be administered strictly.
So you're no longer among the faithful. You're an infidel.
You're an infidel, but you're worse than an infidel who was never a Muslim. So you're worse.
Right.
When my friend and I were arrested, all the authorities knew was that we had become Christians. That was crime enough for them and reason enough to sentence us to death by hanging. They did not know that we had distributed 20,000 Bibles across Iran, that we ran 2 home churches, that we spoke openly about Jesus and the gospel, bringing many other Iranians who were hungry for truth and a relationship with the true God to Christianity as well. Since being released from prison due to pressure on the regime and moving to the United States, I've spoken out and written widely about the need to bring down the Islamic Republic. In a dream, God once told me he was giving them a chance to repent. Otherwise, he would destroy them. That's pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Given the evil it represents and the death and suffering it has inflicted, no means to do so are illegitimate. I speak from my personal experience, but also as a Christian. The Quran, this is continuing to quote her, the Quran is explicit about the status of Jews and Christians. It is incompatible with religious freedom It requires subservience to Islam, their God, and their prophet. It does not allow non-Muslims to live peacefully alongside Islam, and certainly not in any way that they deem as a conflict with Islam. Recently, there's been friction between President Trump and Pope Leo related to the war against the Islamic Republic. The president wrote that the Pope should get his act together as Pope, use common sense, stop catering to the radical left, and focus on being a great Pope, not a politician. It's hurting him very badly, and more importantly, it's hurting the Catholic Church. Pope Leo responded, "I have no fear," and this is now she's quoting Pope Leo, "I have no fear of the Trump administration or speaking out loudly of the message of the gospel, which is what I believe I am here to do. There has also been this threat against the entire people of Iran, and that is truly unacceptable. There are certainly issues of international law here, but even more, it is a moral question concerning the good of the people as a whole in its entirety." Then back to her. "What I know as an Iranian who spent nearly a year on death row and a lifetime subjugated by the evil Islamic regime as a woman and as a Christian is that the threat of to the Iranian people comes from the Islamic Republic. Not only should pressure not yield, but pressure on the regime works. The Islamic Republic is evil. The Iranian people and Christians in Iran must be supported through all means necessary. If Pope Benedict spoke up on my behalf, I can't imagine him not speaking up for all Iranians, and Iranian Christians in particular. Where was Pope Leo's moral outrage when the Islamic Republic slaughtered tens of thousands?" And so it goes on, but I'm going to stop there. But you get the point. So this is a woman who speaks from a position of authority. Now, there's a couple of other things that I find particularly interesting about this particular pope.
So I think you would say she speaks from a position of experience and insight.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Better said.
Yeah.
Her personal experience, one as an unguarded person in Iran, and I say that because the Pope. I didn't know this, and I started doing some research. How is the Pope protected in the Vatican? Did you know? You know how the Pope is protected?
No, tell me.
By the Swiss Guard, and they have automatic weapons. They are armed to the teeth,
right?
And they protect the Pope inside a large wall where not a single person can immigrate to the Vatican. Not a single person can immigrate to the Vatican illegally. It is not possible. And if they tried to, they would be punished. If they were caught, they'd be thrown out. Maybe punished, but certainly thrown out.
Right.
So this Pope, to me, when he was named Pope, now I'm not a Catholic, okay? So, but when he was named Pope, I said, well, this will be interesting because other than Pope John Paul II, in my lifetime, I have not found the popes to be particularly interesting. I've not found them to be particularly strong religious leaders from a moral standpoint. John Paul II was the one who stood up against communism, and he was shot, by the way. He wasn't killed,
right?
But he was shot in part for his standing against evil in the world.
Yes.
This Pope apparently does not see evil.
Well, it's incoherent. And, to that degree, I think that his authority, his moral authority, his religious authority would have to be diminished by this kind of thing. Yeah,
well, it's going to be interesting. So I now want to get to something else. So what I did was I said, okay, well, let me do a search on do Catholics have a just war theory? The search came up from Catholic.com. Okay? Here was my question. What qualifies as a war that is moral to wage? That's the question. Answer. The Catechism of the Catholic Church lays out the conditions for just war.
Catechism, you mean?
Catechism. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the teachings. Very different.
Thank you. Thank you for that correction.
They haven't had a catechism yet.
Yeah, they haven't had that. Well, they're getting on there. But anyway, a catechism. Catechism lays out the conditions for just war in paragraph 2309. There are 4 bullet points. The damage inflicted by the aggressor on the nation or community of nations must be lasting, grave, and certain. All other means of putting an end to it must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. There must be a serious prospects for success. The use of arms must not produce evils and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated. The power of modern means of destruction weighs very heavily in evaluating this condition. But then the catechism concludes with this. Catechism.
There's no L in it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll go the, and you say the word. Okay. All right. The catechism goes on to conclude this, and this is a great, very important paragraph. These are the same elements enumerated in what is called the just war doctrine. The evaluation of these conditions for moral legitimacy belongs to the prudent judgment of those who have responsibility for the common good.
Yeah.
So that is the elected officials. Now,
well, this is the studied statement of the church, I think.
Yes, that has been studied, and this is hundreds of years of work to come up with that.
Yeah, I think it may be close to 1,000 years.
Okay, well, that's why I said hundreds. I wanted to be sure that you didn't correct me again.
Well, Thomas Aquinas, I think, was very interested in this, and I recall he was around in the 1200s.
Okay, and we did a work on him.
Yes, yeah, Knowledge Products.
Well, no wonder you know more than
that's
I do.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, but here's what's also then interesting, and this is the type of thing that it's so today. On April 14th, due to recent discourse regarding the Catholic Church's teachings on war and peace, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops releases a statement clarifying her stance on just war theory on Wednesday, and they changed what just war theory means so that it now comports with what the Pope said. Mm-hmm. So hundreds of years of work to come up with what is just war has now been the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. I apologize.
Yeah.
Bishops.
Your tongue is tied a little bit today.
My tongue is tied today, yes. Bishops is, and so they've now clarified. So here's what it says now. Here's what they now say. Quote, for over 1,000 years, the Catholic Church has taught just war theory, and it is that long tradition the Holy Father carefully references in his comments on war. Well, that's not true.
Right.
It's not what he referenced.
They're trying to walk it back.
They're trying to walk it back, and they're trying to now claim that what he said before comports with hundreds of years of their catechism.
Congratulations.
And it goes, thank you. And it goes on to say, a constant tenet of that 1,000-year tradition is a nation can only legitimately take up the sword in self-defense once all peace efforts have failed. That's not true either.
Right.
Just war theory can be offensive. It does not have to be just defensive. So what's fascinating here is that the Catholic Church in the United States is not interested in, frankly, in truth. And this is what's happening. This is a greater concern for me. This is another example of institutional rot.
Right.
And so now we get into how Democrats have responded and how the media has responded. From my perspective, I'm interested if you agree with this. From my perspective, they have lifted the Pope up as a great moral authority. They're looking at him as a person with great moral authority. That's what I hear every time I see a Democrat interviewed. He talks about the Pope. He talks about him as a person with great moral authority.
Well, this to me, it's like the emperor with no clothes, or Rumpelstiltskin, and all. You know, do you believe me or your lying eyes?
Well, but I'm talking about how they are referring to the Pope.
I'm saying,
and the media refers to the Pope as a great person with moral authority.
Yeah.
What do they say when the Pope says something about abortion? They look the other way. This person has no moral authority. And so what I'm saying is that this is the institutional rot that you and I worry about.
Right.
Because if the Pope has moral authority, then don't pick and choose. Don't decide his opinions are a la carte.
Right.
You know, they're just not.
Right.
And so this, I don't know exactly how this is going to end. I think it'll probably have its day in the sun, and then it'll kind of
People
go
pay attention
away.
to other things.
Other things will pop up. But there was also in my kind of background in studying and all this thing, I went online and I looked up and I found this was very interesting. This is from the Smithsonian, and nobody's going to claim the Smithsonian is some right-wing organization.
Oh no!
And it also was reported on PBS. So here's the headline: Newly unsealed Vatican archives lay out evidence that Pope Pius XII had knowledge of the Holocaust.
Okay.
Now, and it also then points out that that Pope had a secret back channel to Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
And what these documents point out is that the Pope's main interest in dealing with Hitler was the protection of the Vatican.
The military protection of the Vatican?
Because Italy was part of the Axis power, and the Pope was interested to make sure that the Vatican wasn't destroyed.
Yes,
as part of the war effort by the Axis. And so what the Pope did was, that Pope at that time was more interested in the Catholic Church, and Catholics in war-torn areas, but also especially the Vatican. And what's interesting about this is that now we know that that Pope did know. The records show that Pope did know about the Holocaust and was silent. And so,
because I guess the logic here is he would not oppose the Axis powers because it exposed the church to destruction.
To destruction if Hitler won. Yeah. He did not want to be an enemy of Hitler. And so I just found all of that to be very interesting. And then my last little piece, Michael, for you is that in 1960, John Kennedy ran for president, and he was the first Catholic not to run for president, but he was the first Catholic to win the Democrat nomination. Mm-hmm. I don't think a Catholic had ever won the Republican nomination. Al Smith had run. He was a Catholic, but he didn't win. He didn't win the Democrat nomination when he ran against Roosevelt.
Okay.
And so Kennedy, as the nominee, was asked to address how he felt about his religion and how it related to his presidency. And so I think it's interesting that we quote from Kennedy as a politician. He says, "Because I am a Catholic and no Catholic has ever been elected president, the real issue in this campaign the real issues have been obscured, perhaps deliberately, in some quarters less responsible than this. So it is apparently necessary for me to state once again, not what kind of church I believe in, for that should be important only to me, but what kind of America I believe in, an American that is officially neither Catholic, Protestant, nor Jewish, where no public official either requests or accepts instruction on public policy from the Pope, the National Council of Churches, or any other ecclesiastical source, where no religious body seeks to impose its will, directly or indirectly, on the general populace or public acts of its officials, and where religious liberty is so indivisible that an act against one church is treated as an act against all." Kennedy went on to emphasize, "I am not the Catholic candidate for president. I am the Democrat Party's candidate for president who happens also to be a Catholic. I do not speak for my church on public matters, and the church does not speak for me." He went on and pledged, "Whatever issue may come before me as president on birth control, divorce, censorship, gambling, or any other subject, I will make my decisions in accordance with these views, in accordance with what my conscience tells me to be the public interest, and without regard to outside religious pressures or dictates, and no power or threat of punishment could cause me to decide otherwise."
So, I mean, this is the huge category of church and state, and how do they interrelate? It's very complex. It's a giant chess game.
Yeah.
Something strikes me from what you just read is that he would rely on his conscience. You know, you would think that the first...
And not the Pope. And he said, "I will not take instructions from the Pope."
I heard that, but he said, "Instead, I will rely on my conscience." I would say instead the first thing he should rely on is the law.
Well, we're taking what he said.
I know.
We're not trying to pick apart.
I think it's very powerful what he said and very well constructed. I like it a lot. But I would push back against the idea that his lone obligation is to his conscience.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
That's a fair point. But anyway, where Iran the situation in Iran as it stands now, as I understand it, so push back if you think it's different than this, is as of Friday, President Trump announced that he had an agreement with the Iranian officials that the document would be signed by Sunday, and that the Strait of Hormuz was open for business. And then within hours of that, a ship going through the Strait of Hormuz was fired at by the Revolutionary Guard ships of the IRGC, and some officials in Iran claimed that the agreement that Trump said that the people that he had been negotiating with was not sufficient, and that they didn't agree with that. Mm-hmm. So here's my question for you: is there anybody in Iran or any group of people in Iran that Trump can, at this point, negotiate with and sign a document with that is binding on Iran?
I think the answer is no.
Yeah.
I think they've killed 500 of the top leaders. You know, the competition for succession, this takes years. In the United States, it took years after the Declaration of Independence to get to a constitution and build out these institutions of the government. Theirs has been broken. And what's going to follow it? I think one interpretation of what we're seeing is that you have some people that want to survive and make a deal. They're even willing to give up nuclear weapons, according to Trump, that you've got some people that are willing to negotiate that away. And it appears that you have hardliners that are now saying, no, we're not going to abort our whole mission. It's in their constitution to prevail over the whole world, particularly their neighborhood, but then eventually the whole world.
Yeah.
And as long as you have that kind of ethos, that kind of ideology built into their institutions and their governing documents,
and a history of massive slaughter,
yes,
of their own people
and other people,
yes, and other people, yes.
And so I think it would be insanity, idiocy to rely on a written agreement with those people. I do think that Trump is probably playing out that angle as much as he can to show I tried. Mm-hmm. And I think there's going to be more violence.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens next. The Strait of Hormuz, I don't think is open. I'm not saying it's closed, but I don't think much traffic is going through it. Let's put it that way.
Well, as long as there's a threat. I mean, it doesn't have to be absolutely turned off. You just have to have a threat for insurance to back away, for people just not to take chances. And then it's certainly not working normally. It's working at an infinitesimal percentage of what its capacity is.
What do you think, by the way, what do you think is the longer-term solution? I have a thought that I want to throw out.
Well, pipelines that bypass the Hormuz.
Or you mean a canal?
A canal or pipelines to take the product and
so that it's loaded onto
ships at
a different place.
Yes,
past the Straits of Hormuz.
Yeah.
There's also, when you look at the way the Straits of Hormuz sits, if you go if you go south of there, away from Iran, there seems to be a triangle.
Yeah.
That it would seem to me that you could cut through there like we did the Panama Canal.
You could.
It seems like you could do something where you could eliminate the Strait of Hormuz as something that the Iranians could use as a tactic.
I think
or strategy.
I've read that they're already investing in that infrastructure to take it away from the Strait of Hormuz. There's another choke point south of the Strait of Hormuz that's down where the Houthis are, and they can choke things off down there. Not as easily. It's not as small. Well, the bottleneck is not as small,
and
but
going
it's still
after
there.
the Houthis is not like going after the Iranians.
Right.
The Houthis are sponsored by the Iranians.
Sure.
If Trump maintains his blockade against Iranian imports or exports, Iran will not last long. You know, you and I have talked about this, and it never comes up in the news, which I find interesting. But I keep looking. I keep pulling up and searching to see what's the water supply in Iran and especially in Tehran, and it keeps getting worse. Mm-hmm. I mean, the stories that we talked about back in the fall said that by March 1st, Tehran would be out of water. Well, that turns out not to be true, but the reservoirs have gone from 10% to under 8%, and the stories that I read say that once it gets to 5%, there's not enough water pressure to be able to provide water. And so somewhere in here, unless Iran gets an extraordinary amount of rain, somewhere in here that's going to be a separate problem for the Iranian regime. So at any rate, I guess we've discussed this about as much as we can. But I find the media's lifting up the Pope on this particular issue, but ignoring the Pope on other moral issues. I find that to be not surprising, but same thing with the Democrats, because Democrats now they want abortion on the last day of the pregnancy, mm-hmm. And that just flies completely in the face of Catholic Church doctrine and what the Pope says. And I just find it to be so interesting how these Democrats cherry pick.
Well, selective allegiance.
Just yes, yeah.
I saw an interesting article since I've seen you that I think explains a lot of this behavior. And this was a guy that described the psychological function of hypervigilance. He said when things get so polarized, people are hypervigilant against the other side.
Yeah.
You know, and Thomas Jefferson said vigilance is the price of liberty, right? You have to have vigilance, and you can't relent and give up because things will creep away. But this author's point was once you've decided that the other side is evil,
right,
is the enemy,
right,
then you're hypervigilant against anything that they do. And I think that explains a lot of the Trump derangement syndrome. You have it on the right as well. You know, pretty much anything the left does is wrong, and it's unhealthy.
Well, it is, but you know, it's kind of interesting. When Biden was president, did the right go out and protest and do what the left does on an ongoing basis?
I think this hypervigilance is far more pronounced on the left.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have Obama derangement syndrome or Biden derangement syndrome in anywhere near the degree you see Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah. Everything he does. It's amusing to me to see the New York Times sends me an email, and I don't subscribe, so I can't read the articles. But, you know, out of 4, 5, or 6 leaders they have there, they're constantly something that undermines Trump.
Right.
It's pretty clear that's their criteria for picking.
And by the way, that has an effect on society.
Sure.
It's like I liken it to a prize fight, where one prize fighter is hitting the other guy in the body as much as he can, and believing that eventually body blows will lower the defenses of the opponent and wear them down.
Yes.
And that's, by the way, to me, when people say, well, how can you tolerate what Trump says in response to the media? And I said, well, if you don't punch back, if all you do is absorb the punches, you're going to eventually lose the fight. And George W. Bush believed that it was appropriate it was necessary for the president to stay above the fray. When in his last day in office, his popularity was somewhere between 25 and 30%. And nobody he had lost a tremendous amount of support from his own supporters, and he had lost my support primarily because I said if he won't fight for himself, why should I fight for him? If he won't fight for himself, and that's one of the things that the people who believe that Trump's policies are good, and I would fit myself in that category.
Right.
I may not like exactly the way that he fights for himself, but I absolutely like the fact that he does fight for himself.
Right.
Just some of his language finds to be off-putting, and some of his memes and whatnot that he does. But I put that all into a context of, well, how is the other side? What are they saying about him? And if you say calling him a racist and calling him Hitler and calling him a fascist and a Nazi and all this other stuff, the way Trump is responding to that is actually less provocative than the language they use.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, let's move on.
Okay.
Anything else that you wanted to talk about on that particular subject? Okay.
No. I think there's going to be more war.
I agree. I agree that I think there will be. I think there will be more violence. Do you think we'll be blowing up their utilities?
I don't know. For military purposes, things that they use for military purposes, yes. I don't understand the threats to bridges and power plants.
Well, there may be some bridges that the military uses.
Sure.
That
but you need to distinguish. Tearing up civilian infrastructure, I cannot support. I can't understand why he would threaten it.
You need to know it. Well, I can understand why he would threaten it.
Well,
there's a difference between blowing it up and threatening it.
Yeah.
Threatening to do it to get them to agree to something.
Yeah.
Is to me a useful tool.
Well, I've heard that language can be understood as a way to get their attention because they don't seem to pay attention to much else.
Right.
But his opponents here think he means it literally. He's going to destroy a civilization.
Right.
And I don't think any reasonable person could support that. There's a lot of innocent people there. I have heard, at the end of World War II, there was some generals in the United States that bombed dams in North Korea. And part of their hatred for us still comes from that. There's unnecessary destruction of their well-being, their livelihood. It didn't
At
have
the end of the Second World War.
Yeah, maybe at the end of the Korean
War. Okay.
Yeah,
I
just misstated that.
Okay.
But that kind of stuff just lays generational hatred.
Yes, it does.
And I can see no reason to do that in Iran. There's a lot of people from Iran that are rooting for us to go back and wipe this scourge.
Well, this lady that I quoted from earlier, she lived there.
Yeah.
So she knows from personal experience.
Yeah.
And she has seen hundreds of thousands of Iranians viciously murdered. Yeah. And if you're a Christian in Iran, that's a death sentence. And if you are a converted Christian, that is absolutely a death sentence. And it was only public pressure on the regime,
right,
that caused her and her friend to be released from prison.
Right.
Now, there's another subject that it has come up since we were last here, and almost disappeared, and that is Eric Swalwell run for governor. And so let me
is he your hero?
Eric Swalwell to me is worse than Jeffrey Epstein. And I want to explain why. Okay. I think he's worse than Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein never held political office.
Yes.
Jeffrey Epstein never had a high-level security clearance. Eric Swalwell could pass laws.
Well,
he could introduce legislation.
Participate in passing laws.
And
he was on what committees?
He was on the Intelligence Committee.
Okay.
So he had a very, very high-level security clearance. So he could know our nation's secrets. And the Democrats put him on that committee. They're the ones who put him there because Democrats select the minority members to go on committees when they're in the minority in the House. And if they're in the majority, they pick the majority. But they don't get to pick – whoever's in the majority doesn't get to pick all the members on committees.
Right.
And so Eric Swalwell was a person who could learn and know our nation's secrets. And we now hear after these reports came out. So let me go back and talk about see if you and I agree on what actually the sequence of events. Swalwell was leading in the polls, for governor as far as Democrats were concerned. He was at 12 to 13%. There were two Republicans in the race who were at 18 and 15 or 16%. So there were two Republicans who actually were higher in the polls than any Democrat.
And in California, the way this works is the two top percentages, vote getters, then run in the general election.
Yes, in the primary. So there is a primary. There are two Republicans.
In the primary or the general election?
No, there will be a primary. And the Republicans and Democrats run against each other, as you point out, in the primary.
And it's the top two out of that, and it could turn out to be the two Republicans win, and they face each other.
They face each other in the general.
Yes,
and the Democrat Party came out because there are 8 Democrats running, and there are 2 Republicans running. Mm-hmm. And there's a Democrat. Swalwell had like 12 points. You had Katie Porter and you had Tom Steyer, who each had somewhere between 9 and 11 points, and then you had 2 or 3 who are down in that 4 to 7 point category, and then you had a couple who are down there in the 1 or 2%.
And they need one of them to get over 18 to get into the general election.
Well, to get over to at least come in second,
right?
And so the Democrat Party very publicly said, and this was interesting to me, they very publicly said that we need to encourage, and in Democrat language that means force, some Democrats who are in the race to drop out, so that the Democrat Party has at least one of the 2 people who are in the general election. And so then after they make that statement, not a single one of the 8 Democrats dropped out, not one. And so then all of a sudden, a couple of weeks after they make that statement, the San Francisco Chronicle, a very left-wing paper, writes a story about Eric Swalwell and his accusers. Within hours, CNN was interviewing the accusers on CNN. Mm. How fast they put that together if they didn't know anything ahead of time.
Right.
MS Now. MS Now. I call it Ms. Now.
All right.
They were all over it. ABC was all over it. NBC was all over it. All of the left-wing media, the major legacy media, man, they were all over Swalwell. And so they took him down. Now, do I believe that Swalwell did most of the things that these women are accusing him of? I absolutely do. I believe those women, or most of them, are telling the truth. So I think that the fact that he's dropped out doesn't mean his troubles are behind him personally.
Let me just jump in and say here, I have a level of skepticism about claims like this that come to the fore right at a politically sensitive point, like what happened to Kavanaugh. I just don't think those people deserve to be believed on the face of it.
All right, I'm going to push back on that because using the Kavanaugh as an example, Blasey Ford brought up something that she claims happened over 30 years ago.
Right.
She happened to claim it happened in a county that had no, or in a jurisdiction that had no statutory limit on what Kavanaugh did. She couldn't remember the house. She couldn't even remember the month.
We're both skeptical of her claim.
No. I'm skeptical of hers. I'm not skeptical.
Yeah.
No, you're skeptical of the others. I'm not.
All right.
Because I've listened to what they've said.
Okay.
And I've listened to what CNN then went to confirm it. CNN went and talked with a number of friends, talked to the mother, and talked to the doctor, where the woman said, I went to the hospital to check to see if I was pregnant and to be checked for sexually transmitted diseases. And all of that apparently is part of the record. Blasey Ford had no one backing her up. Not a single piece of evidence to back her up.
Look, let me say this. I think Swalwell is a snake. What hasn't been covered, you remember he had a girlfriend that was suspected to be a Chinese spy long ago. So he's a bad actor. Mm-hmm. And I put very little beyond what he's capable of doing. So I think he's a bad guy. He probably did these things. I'm just saying, in fairness, I'm very skeptical of people that wait till a politically sensitive moment to bring this stuff forward.
And I'm not arguing with you on that part. Okay. What I'm saying is that this was a setup by the Democrats.
Right.
Because the Democrats had to get somebody out of the race who had a lot of support, who they didn't believe that particular person could get to the necessary level of support.
Yeah, I think that's very plausible and convincing.
So I believe he was kneecapped by the Democrat Party itself. Mm-hmm. Now, but this gets into why? What do you think the reason is that the Democrat Party sees the governor's race of California to be such an important race? Because if the Democrats control the legislature, a Republican governor can't pass anything. So why is that? Why is that particular position? Why is that so important to the Democrat Party?
Well, I know there's a lot of institutional involvement from the pension funds to the labor unions to a bunch of that. I'm suspecting the answer lay in that panorama somewhere, but I don't know exactly.
I'm going to be more specific.
Please do.
I believe that because you and I have discussed this before, when you look at all of the spending in these third-party payment systems and government-funded systems, what you and I have pointed out in previous podcasts is that blue states spend 2 and 3 and sometimes 4 times as much on Medicaid within their states.
Yes.
And we're now learning that much of this is fraud. Mm-hmm. Okay? And when you have widespread fraud, it makes no sense that if you have widespread fraud that the government didn't at least allow it and maybe even encouraged it. I believe the amount of fraud that took place in California is absolutely, and there still is in the tens of thousands of fraudulent entities. I believe that the Gavin administration allowed it to happen and encouraged it to happen because it improved the economy of California, because all these federal dollars flowed into California because of the fraud. Because the way it works is the state spends $1 and the federal government gives $2 or $3.
I got it. So I think where this is leading is that a Republican governor would be a fox in the hen house.
A Republican governor could
expose
the fraud.
Yeah.
And I believe that is an existential threat to the Democrat Party in the country. If it is exposed by a Republican governor on a massive scale, and then all these other states that are spending as much money on Medicaid and these federal programs as California on a per capita basis.
Well, that would be Illinois and New York.
Illinois, Minnesota, New York. It's Massachusetts. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's every blue state that has been controlled by a Democrat governor and legislature for more than 10 years is way higher on average. And so what I'm saying is that the Democrats will do anything to make sure that a Republican doesn't become governor of any of those states because they're in a position to expose it for what it is.
Yes.
So, all right. So I'm going to set that one aside. Then the third thing I wanted to talk about today is that you hear the media and you hear Democrats, and I suppose there's some Republicans who use these terms, but not that many. And so, but it was always, remember, Fauci, follow the science. In fact, he even claimed he was the science, which I found to be kind of silly. But then the media,
it's profoundly wrong because science is not about a person. There's no person's opinion that is science.
Right. And
science is impersonal. It's a method.
And actually, there are very few scientific facts that aren't being examined to determine whether or not they're actually true or not.
And re-examined. That's the whole point of science is things have to be falsifiable or else they become basically a religious commitment.
Right. In fact, even Einstein's E equals mc squared has been improved upon.
Yeah.
It hasn't been proven to be exactly wrong, but not exactly correct.
Yeah, it's the same as Newton's laws. They were right in the sphere that we observe, but they were wrong at a cosmic scale.
Exactly.
And so now E equals mc squared works more broadly. It underlies quantum mechanics and semiconductors and all kinds of things we use every day. It's been repeatedly shown to be accurate. It overthrew Newton's mechanics at the wide margins, subatomic and cosmic scale.
Yes.
And so we continue to learn, and we're finding there's wrinkles in there that can be overturned.
And what's interesting is Einstein would regularly say that had it not been for Newton, he himself would not have made the discoveries that he did.
Sure.
So it's a cumulative effect.
Right.
It's a cumulative effect.
And skepticism is the basic principle of science.
Yeah. And by the way, science, we use the term science in a number of different ways. One of them is political science, which it meaning that we're trying to refine the way our politics works for the betterment of society.
Yeah.
That is what the study of political science is.
Yeah, I've heard these called the soft sciences, and they are a legitimate effort to make them more rigorous and objective.
And economic science.
Social science.
Yeah, that's the study, and so much of this has to do with the study of human nature.
Sure.
And so gets us to kind of the next subject, and that is that you hear people talk about the media people follow the science and all this stuff if it's convenient for them.
Right.
But there was an article that came out in the Wall Street Journal a few days ago, and the title of it is "The Growing State Tax and Jobs Divide." And what the writer, actually it's the editorial board, what they did was they took the 8 states in the country that have no state income tax, and they said, how are those states doing in terms of affordability, in terms of job growth, in terms of homelessness, all the different things
social indicators
of success,
right,
of moving in the right direction.
Right.
They took that, and then they took the 8 highest taxed states on marginal income tax rates, and they compared the two, and not a single one of the high tax states was better than the worst of the no income tax states. So not one.
That's polarization for you.
Yeah, and so when people say we follow the science, well, if you're given that data, how can you support not just the current tax rates, but how on earth can you support raising those tax rates? And that's exactly what blue states are doing. And so my question, Michael, is why do they keep doing it? And why does the media, especially the media, why does the media keep supporting it when this data is out there for anybody to find? This is not hard stuff to find.
Well, they're not impartial observers. They're not looking at the data and making a reasoned judgment. As we've said in this podcast many times, people believe what they prefer to be true, what they want to be true. Mm-hmm. And I think those people in those states legitimately think that's the way to something that's better. Now, whether it's better for everybody or better for them, you can get into questions like that. But they've been pursuing these policies for decades, maybe a century. They're not going to relent now and say, "Oh, we were wrong."
But they're accelerating. What I'm saying is that they're accelerating, and see, I agree with everything that you just said, but we haven't gotten to the. For me, there's the media agreement. I think has more to do with social standing. Mm-hmm. The media in the blue states, they like rubbing elbows with the people in power.
Right.
The people in power in the blue states are the Democrats because they hold the majorities. They are the movers and shakers. We live in Tennessee.
Right.
A Democrat in the state house has no power at all.
Right.
A Democrat in the state house may go around and try to persuade people to do things, but they can't force a bill to the floor. They can't do anything.
Yeah.
And so consequently, and when it's like that, the media doesn't spend a lot of time with them because there's no news that they get. I remember back when I was doing talk radio years ago, I could talk to Newt Gingrich's chief of staff just by picking. I think his name was Tony Blank, but it's been a long time. And I could pick up the phone and call him, and he would answer 3 out of 4 times and call me back within an hour on the other times. Once Newt Gingrich became Speaker of the House, reaching him was impossible.
Yeah.
Not because he was trying to he was busy now.
Right.
He had stuff to do.
Right.
When you're in the minority, you don't have anything to do.
Right.
And so I think that the media is first of all, I don't think they're well educated in the sense of they don't study this stuff. They don't look at it. They're not curious. They're generally lazy, but they like to be associated with power. Mm-hmm. And so that's why the media in the blue states does not call out the policies that are making life less affordable, more homelessness, more crime, all the higher unemployment, all the things that are supposed to be bad. The media doesn't call that out. But the Democrats, remember what I've said, and that is that the Democrat Party is owned lock, stock, and barrel by the government employee unions. And so nothing that the Democrats are doing from a tax standpoint hurts the government employee unions. In fact, it funds them.
Mm-hmm.
And the government employee unions, to repeat what they want, more pay, more benefits, more government employees, and more control of the work environment, meaning you can't fire a government employee unless they've done something heinous.
Egregious,
just heinous.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the four things they want. If you look at Mamdani, he's not cutting any government employees. In fact, he's adding government employees. If you look at Hochul, what she's doing in New York, she's doing the same thing. Now, there's an article, one of the articles I looked at said that New York is losing its share of millionaires. It's lost 31%. It used to have like 12.7% of all the millionaires in the country. Now it has 8-point-something%. And
this
had
was taken when?
From 2010 to 2022.
Oh, that's 4 years old.
It's
got to be way less than that.
I'm
now.
sure they've lost more.
Yeah.
But the article went on to say that had they kept all of those millionaires, that the revenues to the state and city would be $13 billion a year higher. Because in New York, 10% of the voters, 10% of the population pays 75% of the taxes. And so they more than any state in the country has the wealthier people. And by the way, you're in a very high tax bracket in New York at $120,000, mm-hmm. and in New York that's not a lot to live on.
That's
in New
not
York City.
Rich.
No,
that's what it requires to be in the middle class there.
Well, maybe, because by the time you paid your federal taxes and your state taxes and your Social Security taxes and Medicare taxes, you're left with about $70,000.
Right,
and that's tough.
Doesn't go very far.
That doesn't go very far in New York City. So at any rate, so I look at this. So here's a headline here: a New York tax on the out-of-towners. So what Kathy Hochul is now doing with Mamdani's, Mamdani's saying yes, is that if you are not a resident of New York and you own a property, a residential property in New York that's valued at more than $5 million, you're going to pay an additional tax. Now, what's interesting is there's 13,000 homes that fit that category in New York, and they're talking about collecting $500 million a year from those 13,000. That's $40,000 each. How many homes, what will that do to the property values of those homes, and how many of those people will sell?
Yeah.
And so what they do is they project that nobody will sell and they'll get all this money. And then property values decline because now there's people who used to buy property in New York and hold the prices up who will now not only not buy, but they'll sell.
Yeah. Choose Miami.
Huh?
They'll choose Miami.
They'll choose Miami, yeah. So that's an interesting article there. And then this was the hidden cost of New Yorkers shrinking millionaire share. So we've covered that by chasing the millionaires out, they're literally depleting their tax base. And if that accelerates at all, then the deficits at the state level and at the city level explode.
Well,
now,
it's a death spiral. And
yes.
let me probe that a little bit. When I was starting new businesses in an incubator, we look for what we call a virtuous cycle, particularly data-oriented companies that would collect data from their customers, and then when they had more data, they became attractive to more customers because the base is larger, the insights are greater. This is a lot of what Google and Apple and others have done.
Absolutely.
Right, and when you have then more data, you get more customers bring more data, and it just spirals up.
Mm-hmm.
A death spiral is the opposite. You raise taxes, people leave, and there's fewer people to pay what's left.
Right.
And so you raise taxes on them again, more leave, and that's a spiral in the same dynamic in the opposite way.
Yeah, and when they leave, a lot of them, if they are leaving with their business, they're taking their employees with them.
Right.
I mean, so these are policies that make no sense unless you recognize what drives the policies. And it's not good economics. It's not even let's do what's best for all the people of the state, or for as many of the people in the state as we can possibly help. This is helping a very narrow group that they are determined to help, because that's where their money comes from. Another article on New York is Mamdani has now announced the location of his first grocery store. He says, I'm going to spend $30 million to open this grocery store. The people who are in the business, they're saying, we're not sure why he needs to spend $30 million. If we were opening exactly what he wants to, we would spend $10 million. And by the way, the $30 million isn't necessarily what the upper limit will eventually be.
Yeah.
But then he also is saying that the supermarket will lose money every year in order to be able to provide low-income bread and milk and eggs. So this is going to be a disaster. By the way, New York is facing a $5.4 billion annual deficit that has to be solved by July 1st. And so Mamdani's out not trying to figure out how to reduce the budget. He's trying to figure out how to spend more money.
I think there's any chance, what would a solution look like? I mean, what will happen on July 1st is my question to you. They're not going to solve that by July 1st. That's 3 months away.
Michael, I do not know. Hochul is trying to come up with all kinds of interesting taxes that aren't apparent. That's like the tax on the out-of-towners that they claim will raise $500 million. Well, that only solves 10% of the problem.
Yeah.
Then they've got other taxes on businesses and taking away tax deductions that businesses used to have.
Well, they just go in the other direction. They're making the hole deeper. I get it.
Yeah.
And actually, it's not 3 months away. It's more like 10 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
9 weeks.
Yeah. So I'm just saying we're going to be, we'll be here and we'll be reporting on what happens. I think it's useful. At least I hope that our audience finds that if we keep looking at the same subject in the context that we try to provide, using the island as our foundation.
Right.
And what happens there, government costs money. We saw that on the island. When one person decided that they wanted to be the government, the other 9 people had to ask themselves, are we willing to work 10% harder?
Right.
So that somebody can act as the government.
Right.
And now we have it now where in the blue states it's not 1 in 10, it's 2 in 10, and then they're responsible for the entitlements that increase the number of the spending even more. And there's now the political divide in this country is widening. The economic divide between the red and the blue states is widening, and for many of these on these same issues. And I want to kind of on the same note, but with a little slightly different subject, is we talk about how the media takes a piece of information, and to me, the Pope is a great example, where the media just jumped on the Pope and lifts him up as this great moral figure, but when the Pope says something about abortion, whatever the Pope says is not worth even hearing. Right. So he's a moral figure only when it's convenient. Yes. And that doesn't work. That doesn't work for me. If you're going to quote somebody as if he's profound, if he says something stupid, you're going to have to
acknowledge it.
Acknowledge it. Yeah. So on this one, this is a headline where an Iran war, and this is from the Wall Street Journal. An Iran war winner, China's clean energy. And here's this very long article about on this subject. And then you get down to the very end of the article, and it says that China's clean energy produces 5.4% of all of its energy. and the amount that they produce that they need for oil from the Middle East is many times that. And so it's
so they may have gone from 5 to 5.4 or 4 to 5.4, something like that. These are rounding errors in the big picture.
Yeah. And this one's also interesting. And this is also, these are headlines from the Wall Street Journal. And the point I'm trying to make here is I'm not criticizing these things per se. The point I'm trying to make is it's so difficult for people today to know what is true.
Well, and to get perspective.
And if they get their news from news feeds, chances are they're getting news that's incredibly biased and inaccurate. And then if you build your worldview and live your life on a foundation of falsehoods that you don't even know are falsehoods,
right,
the outcome is not likely to be positive. So here are these headlines from the Wall Street Journal within a few days of each other. The Obamacare crisis that isn't. And then this article goes on to point out that many of the things that the people claimed would happen with Obamacare if the ACA extensions, subsidies were extended, that how terrible things would be. And so this
and it hasn't been so terrible.
According to this article,
yeah.
It hasn't been so terrible. And then this was, and that was April 3rd. This is from March 19th, Wall Street Journal. Millions of Americans are going uninsured following expiration of ACA subsidies. So if you read this article, it's terrible.
Right.
What happened was terrible. If you read the other article, you get the opposite opinion, and you get a different set of facts.
Right.
Or I should say different set of evidence, because I don't know what.
Well, it's cherry picking.
Yeah.
We're back to the point on perspective. How are we supposed to guard ourselves against this cherry picking?
Yeah. And that's where common sense. That's where I keep going back. That's why, to me, Michael, what we did on the island is so important, because this is using a simple model to show mathematically you can't possibly disagree, or you can disagree with it, but you can't find fault with the way the mathematics that if one person stops working and becomes government, somebody has to produce what they did.
Yeah. Right.
And these different things, the different concepts and things we did on the island. Well, this was one. The next one. This is also April 3rd. Same day as the same day as.
There's no problem with Obamacare.
There's no problem. This one, the Democrats Obamacare quagmire, and when I read all three articles, this one turned out to be the most interesting to me, because then I went back and I did a bunch of fact checking to find out what the actual numbers are.
Right.
Which you can search and you can find those things. And it is a real quagmire for the Democrats, because the Democrats want to spend more and more money on Obamacare, but this gets back to what I'm saying is what motivates this. And that is the Obamacare subsidies that go to the states is much, much greater than even Medicaid. It's a higher percentage. And so what Democrats see Obamacare as is a way to coin money at the state level. And it will destroy our country. And it is what is driving the cost of health care, where the average citizen who's not on a subsidy and who doesn't have some great health care plan, or doesn't work for the government and have a great health care plan, or isn't on Medicaid, or isn't on Medicare, if they're working for a small or medium-sized business, they're having to spend $1,500 to $2,000 a month on just their family premium, and then they have very, very high deductibles and very, very high copays.
One of my best friends from high school was a musician. He had a little publishing company, but made a lot of his money from gigs and things like that. And when Obamacare came into effect, he was furious, because this exactly happened to him. His private market insurance was canceled. The nature of his employment was sporadic. Although it lasted for decades, he kept getting called back. He had a hard time getting a mortgage when he was young, because the banker would say, "How do I know you're going to get the next call?"
Right.
Well, somebody that has a job, how do you know you're not going to get fired the next day? You don't. But you get the benefit of the doubt.
That's right.
In that situation, you don't as a musician. So he was among the kinds of people that were highly disadvantaged by this.
Yeah. And
by Obamacare.
So I just want to finish this up with just two or three more kind of examples of things that really, to me, this falls under the category of more institutional rot, and institutional rot eventually destroys the foundation.
Yeah.
And this headline here: Los Angeles schools can't do math. That's the headline. The Los Angeles Unified, story goes on, Los Angeles Unified School District, they went on strike, and they ended up getting a salary increase of 11.65% over 2 years, which is considerably higher than the rate of inflation. And I'm going to quote from the article here: while state per pupil spending has soared to $27,000 per pupil, Los Angeles hasn't benefited as much as some other districts, because enrollment has shrunk since 2019. So the number of students is going down, the amount of money they're spending is going up, and the results on the tests are that only 18% of eighth graders in Los Angeles can do math at the mere proficiency level. just proficient, 18%. Nationally, it's 27%, which is deplorable in itself.
Right.
But 18% is just terrible. But they get a pay increase for doing a terrible job, and to juxtapose that, you have a story, and this is why when we say that government is inherently inefficient and private enterprise is inherently efficient, that's not because the people who are in each of those two is a better or worse person. It's that in the private economy you have to respond to the economic circumstances that affect your business,
right.
Whereas in the public sector you don't have to.
Right.
And but this is a story about how Disney is laying off people, and what the executive says, who's when they announced it, says, over the past several months, we have looked at ways in which we can streamline our operations in various parts of our company to ensure we deliver the world-class creativity and innovation our fans value and expect at Disney. Okay? So what they're doing is they're saying we're laying people off so that we can do a better job.
Sure.
And in government, they don't do that.
Right.
So I'm just comparing those two. Both of them are in Los Angeles, by the way. Which
well,
I
the
find,
customers have a choice in the private sector. They do not have to come back the next day.
Yeah. So anyway, Michael, I'm going to wrap it up there. We've got that. We've covered a lot of topics. We've covered Iran, the Pope. We've tried to cover it. I like to think that we're trying to cover it from providing a context to things that provide our audience with a kind of a deeper way of thinking about events as they come up.
Yes.
And I'm pretty confident that by the time we next meet, there'll be additional news.
You think? Well, the deadline is what? Today's Monday. The deadline is Wednesday or Thursday.
Yes, and we will not be back together for almost a week. So something will have. I'm confident that we'll have plenty to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Then.
You bet.